In this video of how did it play out in the book, I'll be covering how an offer from a gentleman, that is episode 4 of season 4, Bridgerton, what it looked like in the book. So first things off, we start with a Lady Whistledown report, and Lady Penwood doesn't want her Rosamond settling for a Mr. Even though her first husband was well born, he was not a member of aristocracy. Mr. Cavender is now interested in Miss Cressida Cowper. So it's clear that Lady Penwood her first husband was not a viscount. In fact, he wasn't even in the peerage, because Lady Whistledown writes that he was not an aristocrat. So, and aristocrats that time were noble people, or people from the peerage. So, Sophie and Mr. Bridgerton, Benedict, get back to London in early May, which meant that the season was in full swing and that Araminta was in residence. That is in London itself, because these aristocrats had multiple houses in different parts of the country. Anthony, a fun fact that I found is that Anthony and Kate now live alone with their children in Bridgerton House, meaning that the entire family, including the Dowager Viscountess, moved from Bridgerton House. Now they're living in a different house, and the new Viscount and Viscountess are the ones who are occupying Bridgerton House. They have 2 sons. The firstborn is Edmund and the secondborn is Miles. Okay, so we also find out that for Sophie, marriage within her own class seemed like a pipe dream, because she wasn't raised to be a servant and she couldn't relate to their world. Not because she was elitist, but it's just because she's stuck in between 2 different worlds. So she doesn't feel like she can relate to either side. But then since she was raised and educated as a nobleman's daughter, she's more familiar with the nobleman. And also she says, she says in the book, Julia that is, even in the middle class, no respecting man in the trade would marry a housemaid. So really her options for suitors are very few and far between. Another fun fact, the Bridgerton housekeeper, we know her in the show as Mrs. Wilson, but then in the book she is Mrs. Watkins. In the book, Violet did Sophie's orientation and hired her as a lady's maid upstairs immediately. And all this happened after Benedict told her about what had happened with Sophie at Cavender's party. So there was no talk of oh, Benedict, there's no position, and all that speech didn't happen. Fun fact in the book, Francesca is not yet married. And Eloise does not wish to just marry anyone. She wants someone who she deems worthy of marrying. So she's not completely opposed. It's just that she's been seeing these same characters over and over again, and she is sure in her heart that none of them is for her. Also, Sophie has good penmanship, which is something that in the end, when we bring all her talents, skills, will be an indication that there is something off about her, in that she's just not a servant. Though we know in the book everything is a slow burn, other people don't know. Anyways, so Violet in the book cares about paying her staff fairly. She comments on Sophie's shabby uniform, not to shame her, but as a note to get her a newer or nicer garment. While she's at the Bridgerton house and she's getting to see Benedict's interaction with Violet, she's left feeling lonely, wistful, and jealous because she never had any adult care for her in that way. But she likes to think that her mother would have loved her had she survived childbirth. And also, I had forgotten to mention this in my other videos, but there's no mention of necklace or a pendant. I think this is just something that they put in the book just as a sentimental touch. However, Sophie feels nice being at the house, at the Bridgerton house, which in the book isn't Bridgerton house. It's something else, but here in this video we'll be I'll be referring to it as the Bridgerton house. So another Lady Whistledown report, Rosamond is having trouble landing a gentleman. And also, something that was different in the book is like, there was that whole Maid Wars saga, and it was like, oh yeah, the Bridgertons, they were untouched by it, but not so. The Bridgertons' lady's maid called Marie left them for Lady Penwood, who so far had gone through 3 ladies' maids, just because she's cruel. Like I said, she's cruel, demanding, harsh. In this fun fact, in this season, Eloise is 21 and she is extremely nosy. Another fun fact is that Violet says that the Bridgerton siblings look like their father. I thought that was really cool because we don't really get to see that. Because Edmund isn't like really written into that show, like we don't get many scenes with him, so that was fun for me to find out. Then during the orientation, Violet comes to the conclusion that Sophie is not who she says she is because she's far too educated to be a housemaid and she can speak French. And she picked that up because she saw Sophie looking at a French book that was on Francesca's desk, and it looked like she wasn't merely glancing at it, but rather she was reading it. So Violet confides in Benedict about this, and she suspects Sophie of being a cast-off daughter of an aristocratic family, forgetting herself with child, or B, she's an illegitimate child of a nobleman. Violet was really sharp, and I don't think that, I think there are subtle nuances that show that you see it usually like giving knowing looks, or you can see her having light bulb moments, but they're very quiet little moments that she takes mental note of things. And one thing I will say about Violet, who is portrayed by Ruth Gemmell, is that Ruth Gemmell, her facial expressions are just like, man, on point. All of them, I enjoy watching their facial expressions. And honestly, if I could, I think one of these days I'll just put mute and just study the art of facial expressions from all these actors. Brilliant. Okay, I continue. Violet makes it her mission to uncover the whole truth, at least as far as her identity is and her background, within a month. And Benedict suggests enlisting the help of Eloise. Eloise is so inquisitive that Violet says that she can get Napoleon to spill his secrets. All right, as Sophie is settling down, she's enjoying the Bridgerton house, and her room is the nicest servant room she's ever been assigned. But even so, she wants it to be a temporary assignment because she doesn't want to be around Benedict, and also because of Araminta, the possibility of bumping into her, right? So with her promotion to lady's maid, and remember, she used to be a housemaid, she used to have like many tasks, but usually her main occupation was housemaid, but now she's lady's maid. So now with her promotion to lady's maid, she might act as a chaperone or escort on outings outside the house. And those outings would probably be to places where Araminta and the other Penwood girls might have frequented. So Sophie is sure that Araminta would lie, cheat, and steal just to make Sophie's life more difficult. And trust me, in the book she does. And I finished the book. Every page did not disappoint. Like from the beginning to the end, no disappointment. I would recommend 10 out of 10. I give that book 5 stars. If you're interested in getting into reading, or you're an avid reader, or you like romance novels, or you like period pieces, I would say, yeah, get the book. The book is cray. Okay, so we know that Violet was, really curious and suspicious of Sophie. So she makes it a point to, just stop by Sophie's room, and she asks her questions. And it's not like Sophie feels like she's being interrogated, but not like in she doesn't feel like she has to be super defensive. She's mostly going in like she really cares. And Violet actually is a caring person, and she does care. So she questions Sophie on her background beyond former employment and references. She's trying to dig deeper into her personal history, her home of origin, her mother's employment, does she have siblings, what was her education like. And then Eloise is also curious about, this new maid that we're getting, because remember, their lady's maid left them. She left. If you get that reference, if you know, you know. She left. She went over to Lady Penwood. So she's just like, yeah, let me see who this new lady's maid is. And then she tests Sophie, and asking, oh yeah, so what happened? Like, what happened with Benedict? Because Violet is talking to her about the Cavender incident and everything. Sophie brings up Benedict, and Eloise is kind of judging, like, are you talking about Benedict harshly, or are you talking about like Benedict in a good light? So Sophie kind of was lighthearted about how she talked about Benedict, and Eloise decided that, okay, I approve. So we also find out that Hyacinth, did you guys know that there's a fourth Featherington sister? I mean, like, where's she at? That's what we want to know. Why isn't there a fourth Featherington sister in the show? So her name is Felicity Featherington, and she is best friends with Hyacinth, and they visit each other often. And they had fought in a book. So in the book previously, we don't know about what, but then they have made up, and now they're hanging out. And Francesca also is visiting with Daphne. And Gregory is at Eton. He did not stop by to visit, but I will say that I do enjoy seeing Gregory and Hyacinth, honestly. I especially enjoy Hyacinth. I just love her energy and her personality, including the actual actress who portrays her, which is Florence Hunt. So we know all this because Violet and Eloise are like putting Sophie up to speed about the rest of the family and all that stuff. And Sophie is feeling like really like nice, in the sense that she finds like they're being really friendly and letting her in on like what the family is up to. And we see that this is very uncommon, and it's uncommon because it's also super friendly. Then we hear Daphne later on, she will help Violet plan the end of the season ball. So I'm curious to see if Violet will throw another ball, right? She will be a hostess. And also Colin is off on his travels so far, as at least as far as this episode is concerned. So the current house that the Bridgerton family is living in is number 5 on Breton Street. So they're in house number 5. That's how I'll refer to it. But it makes sense that in the show that they live in the Bridgerton house, as Anthony and Kate are in India. So the Dowager Countess and the other siblings, in my mind, I rationalize that they could be at the Bridgerton house. It would be appropriate for them to be there. So while Sophie is at number 5 in the book, Benedict is pursuing her in an effort to woo her and slowly convince her to be his mistress. So despite his intention, he genuinely asks her about how she's doing and how she likes working at number 5. And this is important because we see that this care and the interactions of the family with the staff is rare and privileged in that world, because the Ton in general are like standoffish, and they're standoffish and don't really care about people who are below their class. And that's being nice, because they're outright cruel, as we see with Mr. Cavender, and also as we will see later on in the book with Araminta. Then Sophie, during her spare time as she's there, this is how much of a nice time she's having. She manages to read in the garden during her breaks, which mostly take place after her work is done. Sophie in the book has a very strong work ethic, and also when the conditions are also like when her work is done, the girls are away and Violet is napping. So we also find out that Violet gifted Sophie a dress that used to be Francesca's. And while she's in the garden, I should say, reading, Benedict, all day he's been like stalking her before she's had her breakfast, stalking her after she's had her breakfast. So now he's stalking her in the garden. And so he notices her dress, because remember, while they were at the cottage, he was like, oh, that dress is completely ugly. So she's wearing, this is why he's able to notice the dress. He notices a lot of things about her. So then we also learned that it is a custom for the ladies to share frocks with your lady's maid when you are done with the dress. So while they're in the garden, they get to talking, and of course there's lots of teasing. He's trying to convince her like, oh yeah, come live with me, blah blah blah. And she has a moment where she pauses and she reflects, and she's just like, oh my gosh, this guy, I understand why he can't help himself. He just doesn't get it. And he wasn't wrong for him getting me here. And she's kind of going through this thing. She's having internal thoughts and battling within herself. And Benedict sees how Sophie is struggling. And then like when he confronts her about like the struggles she has, in the book it says like he could see like pain and sorrow in her face, in her eyes, and he talks to her about it, and she becomes defensive, and she's like, listen, everybody like is entitled to their secrets, and for me, I'm entitled to my secrets. So this whole thing about secrecy, it reminds him of the woman in silver, which brings him back to wanting Sophie out of this life of servitude. He wants her to be his mistress, and he wants to just give her everything she wants and needs, and to make her life not only free from work, but also for her to have like happiness and joy. That is important to him also, and he believes her being his mistress will at least somehow bring joy to her life in a way. So Benedict doesn't understand why she doesn't choose the easier path, which leads him to confessing his desire for her and how hard it is for him not having her. And so we see in the book that this situation is torture for him, in that seeing her every day and being around her, but then not being able to have her, right? So, but then even though it's torturing him, he's somehow at peace with it, because he feels like he can keep tabs on her, and he feels like she will be safe with him knowing where she is, given the situation that happened at the Cavender house. And also he has this need to protect her. So as they're having this conversation, as they're both having their internal thoughts, he ends up kissing her passionately, might I add, in the garden, right? And then he kisses her because Sophie reminds him so much of the lady in silver, and especially like she is able to ignite the same need that he had for that lady, for the lady in silver. He recognizes that he also needs Sophie in the very same way. But he, like I said in the previous video, like he's holding off on marriage because he doesn't want to commit to someone and then the next day meet the lady in silver, but also because of their class differences. Like he knows he can't marry Sophie, right? But then even if there's all these things, he can't deny his connection to her, and the reality of Sophie being present in his life is like a big deal for him, and her not being just present for a night or just as part of a fantasy in his brain that has been like kind of like repeating in his head. Sophie is real to him, and the lady in silver seems like a fantasy. So he breaks off the kiss because he doesn't want to compromise Sophie in his mother's house, where she could be seen, like if they're caught, right? And if they're caught, he doesn't want her compromised amongst her peers, which would lead to her losing respect and her job. Because why are you kissing on the job A, and why are you kissing your boss's son on the job? So he wants her to choose to be his mistress out of her own free will, and he resorts to wooing and wearing her down as she comes to that realization of becoming his mistress. So he leaves his mother's house and he leaves Sophie hanging, longing for the kiss to never end, and he leaves her when he does, because she's smiling and she's happy, So I ended it here in the breakdown, and it ends in chapter 14, right? Because to me it felt like a cliffhanger where I think would be the end of episode 4, but as we know, episode 4 has its own cliffhanger, and I know that is because of like the screenwriters or whatever are using their creative liberty, so it won't be like pound for pound like exact reflection of the book in the show. So that is where in my mind something that was a similar cliffhanger. But I will say after reading the book, it is steamy. So I haven't watched part 2. I am going to, because it just dropped today, and I had to finish at least part 1 doing my episodes, right? My series. So this is where I'm going to leave it at. But before I go, I will say another fun fact is that Hyacinth is currently 14 years old and Francesca is 20 years old. And I will see you guys on the other side of part 2 when I'm done.